Enter the next quarter miler. A quarter miler refers to a bike ride of roughly 250 miles or 400 kilometers. The reason for it being called a quarter miler is because it's a quarter of 1,000 miler, which we refer to as the miler. Now, for practical purposes, because you can't finish on exactly 400 kilometers in the middle of nowhere, we refer to a quarter mile as anything between 400 and 500 kilometers in distance. And fitting the mold is our newly plotted route from Parys to Kimberley, which we call the Diamond Dash. 480.9 kilometers, a flattish route with only 2,162 meters of vertical ascent, so nothing untoward in terms of big climbing, and very fit for a long weekend of riding. You can almost be back at work on the Monday at a push. The first Diamond Dash ride was completed by Matthew Myberg from KZN on the weekend of the 24th and 25th of February 2024. He completed the route in a time of 42 hours and 50 minutes approximately, from the Eiffel Tower in Parys to the Kimberley War Memorial. Now, it included a sleepover at Bloemhof Dam on the Saturday night, so no doubt if Matt had wanted to go non-stop to Kimberley, he could have shaved a good number of hours off the trip. The city of Kimberley is historic. It's known for a few things, probably most notably the big diamond rush over a century ago, which led to the biggest hand-dug hole being created in the world. The Big Hole, as it's commonly known. A lesser-known bit of trivia about Kimberley is that it was the first city in South Africa, or first town in South Africa, and the first town in the Southern Hemisphere to have traffic lights. If you look at Kimberley. Matt set off from the Eiffel Tower in Parys at 2 a.m. on the Saturday morning, with yours truly in tow. Matt was attempting the Parys Cup, the 1,000-miler from Parys via Kimberley on the Diamond Dash route, but going further all the way to Blouberg in Cape Town, while I was just there for a weekend long ride, hopefully wanting to make Kimberley in time and be back at work on the Monday. The route takes you through some lovely places. It's not an area renowned or celebrated for its scenic beauty, but certainly it was a very pleasant experience out there in the vast expanse of countryside, and it was a very, very quiet route with very few, even farm buckies, passing us on most of the routes over the 2 days to Kimberley. One starts off with a ride through the Vredefort Dome. Now, this is the group of mountains that were created on the edge of what is the biggest meteor impact crater in the world, or believed to be the biggest in the world. And it's a beautiful part of the country, these dome-shaped mountains, but unfortunately we did that all in the dark, and we were coming out of the Vredefort Dome area onto the flat farming lands going towards Viljoenskroon in the Free State, just as the beautiful sunrise was taking place. After that, the route becomes very flat. It hugs the Vaal River a lot of the time, so one should expect that, and goes through what is probably something of a breadbasket for South Africa. A lot of mealie farming, a lot of sunflower farming, cattle farming in between, farming as far as the eye can see. There's not much of open land that's not being farmed in that part of the world. I guess a lot of it under irrigation with pivots from the Vaal River makes sense. It crosses the Vaal a few times, and that's a real highlight. The second largest river in South Africa, beautiful, tranquil, peaceful, quiet flowing river, and we crisscross back and forth over into the Northwest Province and back into the Free State quite a few times during the duration of the trip. The flat route means that it can be rather muddy at this time of year. The rainy season around here is in summer in this inland part of the world, and a lot of the mud seems to sit on the roads. Now, we didn't have it too bad for much of the route, but for a few hours before the town of Bloemhof, where we slept almost 300 k's into the ride, for the few hours before that, we had some significant mud. Did come in handy. We ran out of water at some point, and the mud puddles were useful for drinking water. But apart from that, it became a bit of a grind, going through the mud, sometimes carrying our bikes around big muddy patches which you couldn't ride through because the mud stuck. So that is the downside of riding in summer. I'd say if one wants to do a fast and an easier ride, it's probably the winter months where the roads are dry. Then you just got to carry more clothes for more warm clothes, because that part of the world can also get bitterly cold. As much as it can get very hot in the summer, and we experience that, in the winter it can get bitterly cold, especially at night. There were a few wildlife delights along the way. For one, there was a lot of buck and quite a few game farms in the area, so it seems. There were quite a few big, beautiful puff adders on the road, which we saw. Didn't stick around to photograph them. And then there was the customary tortoise as well, as long as some nice bird life in some of the lakes and dams along the way. There had been quite a bit of rain this summer by the looks of it, so it was wet and dams seemed to be fairly full. The roads conditions were generally good. The Free State gravel roads, you never know what you're going to get entirely. Got a bit rutted nearer to Boshoff, nearer to the end of the ride, as in the drier parts of the ride. But for the first day at least, the roads were in very good condition, generally speaking. A little bit sandy here and there, but as I've said, the only downside was for the few hours before Bloemhof, because it's so flat, I think. A lot of puddles lying around, a lot of mud lying around at that point. There had been storms and earlier in the day ahead of us, and that probably contributed to the muddy patches. But what you often find in the Free State, which is interesting, is that the gravel roads seem to be in better condition than the tar roads. And sometimes tar roads, you can't always tell that it was a tar road anymore. There's very little tar left. They've sort of allowed it to become gravel, not much maintenance happening there. The cuisine in the town surprised us. Now, the Free State towns are in a sorry state, generally speaking, and that was no different but this time around. But we did get treated to a nice KFC breakfast at Viljoenskroon, the first stop. And at the second town of Bothaville, we were pleasantly surprised even to find a mug and bean. And that's unique along these type of routes through the Free State. Normally it's Rick Coffee at a garage shop, and only later down Western Cape Way do you start getting the good coffee. But a mug and bean right there in Viljoenskroon, along with the KFC. So the cuisine was, let's put it this way, pleasantly surprising in the few towns that you go through on the way to Kimberley. The War Memorial finish was for no significant historic reason. It was just purely because of its location. Matt finished there in the evening at just before 9 o'clock. I had since left him to his own devices. Just after the 400 kilometer mark, I was content with my training ride for the weekend at Boshoff. If you finish the ride in good time and you have a few hours to spare the next day before going home, there's a couple of touristy sites, the Big Hole obviously being the big one, the Big Hole Museum. But perhaps if you get there earlier in the day, you might want to book in and stay over at the Kimberley Club, the old historic club where Cecil John Rhodes and Barney Bonato and the likes used to have a few drinks and stay over the night. It's a hotel now. It's quite a very nice hotel, nicely kept and nicely maintained, with a lot of history and probably a lot of the diamond magnates' ghosts still walking the hallowed corridors.